Understand this before anything else. The doubt you feel tonight, the doubt that crept in this morning when you opened your eyes and remembered your circumstances, the doubt that whispered to you in the middle of your prayer, in the middle of your visualization, in the middle of your quiet moment of hope, that doubt is not evidence against you. It is not proof that you are foolish for believing. It is not a sign that the thing you long for is somehow reserved for other people and not for you. Doubt is simply friction. Doubt is simply the old world trying to hold its shape while a new world is being born inside you. And the question was never whether doubt would come. The question has always been what you would do the moment it arrived. Think about this for a moment. Every soul who has ever created something extraordinary out of nothing visible, every soul who has ever taken an invisible dream and clothed it in flesh and circumstance has walked through doubt, not around it, not above it, through it. There is no scripture, no teaching, no law of mind that promises you a life free of doubt. What is promised, what has always been promised, is that persistence in the feeling of the wish fulfilled will outlast the doubt every single time if only you refuse to let go before the harvest comes. Let that sink into your spirit. You were never asked to believe without wavering. You were asked to keep assuming even after the wavering. That is the entire secret hidden in plain sight inside every teaching about faith, every parable about a persistent widow, every story about a woman reaching through a crowd just to touch the hem of a garment because she had decided somewhere deep in her bones that her reaching would not be in vain, even if her hands trembled the whole way there. The truth is, most people give up on their assumption at the exact moment it would have worked. They plant the seed of a new state of consciousness. They water it with feeling for a day, maybe 2 days, maybe a week, and then the outer world, which has not yet caught up to the inner change, sends them a piece of old evidence, a bounced check, a cold text message, a doctor's report that has not yet reflected the healing already alive in the unseen. And in that moment, faced with old evidence contradicting a new inner conviction, they collapse. They say to themselves, see, it isn't working. And they abandon the very state that was moments away from crystallizing into form. You must realize that this is not a flaw in you. It is simply what happens when a person has never been taught the true architecture of manifestation. They have been taught that belief is a single event, a light switch you flip once and it stays flipped forever. But belief, real belief, the kind that moves mountains and turns water into wine and raises the dead in symbol and in substance, is not a single event. It is a returning. It is a decision made again and again and again, especially in the very moments when it would be so much easier to let it go. This is why the ancient scriptures never once celebrated the person who believed easily. They celebrated the one who wrestled all night with the angel and would not let go until the blessing came. They celebrated the one who kept knocking on a door that seemed to remain forever shut. They celebrated the woman who was told no again and again by everyone around her and who kept saying, even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table, refusing to release her claim on the miracle she had already decided was hers. Feel this deeply. The very fact that you are doubting right now, the very fact that you are seeking these words means something extraordinary is stirring inside you. Doubt does not visit the indifferent. Doubt does not trouble the person who has already given up. Doubt is the resistance you feel precisely because a new reality is trying to be born through the old one, and something has to give. You are standing exactly where every soul before you has stood at the threshold of becoming, caught between the old evidence of the senses and the new evidence of the imagination, and the only thing left to decide is which one you will feed with your attention. Allow yourself to see this clearly. Your imagination is not decoration. It is not a pleasant escape from a harder reality. Your imagination is the operative power of God functioning through you right now in this very moment, whether you believe it or not, whether you feel it or not. Every state you dwell in, every scene you rehearse in the privacy of your own mind is being pressed like a seal into the substance of your life. This has never stopped being true, not for a single second of your existence. The only variable, the only thing that has ever determined the harvest is which state you dwelt in long enough, faithfully enough, persistently enough for it to take root and grow beyond the reach of your doubt. Consider this: if imagination truly creates reality, and it does, this has been whispered by mystics and prophets and quiet contemplatives across every tradition since the beginning of recorded consciousness, then the only reason your current life does not yet reflect your desire is not because the law failed you. It is because somewhere along the way you return to the old assumption more consistently than you held the new one, not because you are weak, not because you are unworthy, but simply because no one taught you that assumption is not a single leap, it is a discipline of return. Let this settle within you. You are not being asked to never doubt again. That would be asking you to stop being human. What you are being asked to do is something far more achievable and far more powerful. You are being asked every single time doubt visits you to notice it without becoming it. To let the doubt pass through the room of your mind like a stranger passing through a house that is no longer for sale. You do not have to fight the doubt. You do not have to argue with it. You do not have to prove it wrong with logic. You simply have to decline its invitation to move in and live with you, and instead gently, patiently, without drama, return your attention to the feeling of the wish already fulfilled. Notice what happens when you stop treating doubt as an emergency. The moment you stop panicking every time an unwanted thought or an unwanted circumstance appears, you take away its power to derail you. Doubt only has the power that your reaction gives it. A doubt that arrives and is met with calm, quiet redirection back to your chosen state dissolves within moments. A doubt that arrives and is met with fear, with frantic questioning, with despair becomes a foothold. And from that single foothold, it will attempt to rebuild the entire old world inside you. Imagine for a moment two travelers walking the same road toward the same destination. Both of them encounter a storm halfway through the journey. The first traveler, at the sight of dark clouds, turns around and says, "This proves the destination was never real. This proves I was foolish to believe I could get there." And so they abandon the road and return to where they started, cold and disappointed, feeding themselves later with only the memory of the storm. The second traveler, in the very same storm, pulls their coat a little tighter, keeps their eyes fixed on the road ahead, and simply says, "Storms pass, and I am still walking toward where I am going." The destination for both travelers is equally real, equally available, equally waiting. The only difference between the one who arrives and the one who never does is what they decided to do the moment the storm appeared. You are not the doubt that passes through you. You are the awareness that watches it pass. You are not the fear that visits your mind at 3 a.m. You are the one who can, even in that fear, gently turn the wheel of attention back to the feeling of already having, already being, already living in the answered prayer. This is not denial of your circumstances. This is not pretending the unwanted evidence does not exist. This is a far higher art. This is the art of choosing again and again which reality you will feed with the currency of your attention, knowing that whichever one receives your attention long enough is the one that will eventually harden into fact. The truth is, your outer world is not the authority over your inner world. It has only ever appeared that way because most people have never dared to reverse the relationship. Most people have spent their entire lives believing because they see, when the entire secret hidden inside every genuine spiritual teaching from every corner of the world is that you must first believe and then you shall see. The order matters. The order is everything. To wait for the outer proof before you allow yourself the inner conviction is to have the whole process completely backwards. And it is why so many people pray and hope and wish and never receive, because they are waiting for the fruit to appear before they will agree to plant the seed. This is why persistence in assumption matters more than the intensity of a single moment of belief. A single powerful feeling held for one afternoon and then abandoned the next day when nothing visible has changed will rarely be enough to bridge the gap between the invisible and the visible, but a modest, quiet, unremarkable feeling of already having your desire return to faithfully day after day, especially on the days when it seems most absurd, most impossible, most contradicted by the evidence in front of you. That is the feeling that eventually bends the world. You must realize that between the moment you first assume a new state and the moment it manifests in your outer experience, there is almost always a gap. Sometimes the gap is short and grace moves quickly and you barely have time to doubt before the answer arrives. But more often, especially for the desires that matter most to you, the ones that would require you to become someone genuinely different than who you have been, the gap stretches wider. And it is precisely inside that gap that most people lose the very thing they were on the verge of receiving. Let that sink into your spirit. The gap is not a sign of failure. The gap is not evidence that your imagining did not work. The gap is simply the necessary distance between a seed being planted and a seed being harvested, and no amount of digging the seed back up to check on it will make it grow faster. It will only disturb the roots that are already forming beneath the surface, unseen, unfelt, but entirely real. The wise ones across every age have understood this. They have called it different names: faith, conviction, steadfastness, the peace that passes understanding. But underneath every name, it is the same principle. It is the decision to remain faithful to an unseen reality, even while surrounded by evidence that seems to contradict it entirely. It is Abraham, so the ancient story goes, looking up at a sky full of stars he could not count, being told his descendants would be as numerous as those stars, and choosing, against every rational indicator of his advanced age and his wife's advanced age, to consider it already done. It is not that he never doubted. Scripture itself, if you read it closely, shows moments of very human hesitation. But the hesitation did not have the final word. The persistence in the assumption did. Feel this deeply. Every single person who has ever manifested something extraordinary out of what looked like impossible circumstances has had to make the same choice over and over, sometimes daily, sometimes hourly, sometimes minute by minute, in the darkest stretches of their gap. They were not free of doubt. They were simply unwilling to let the doubt be the final vote. They understood, whether consciously or intuitively, that the mind casts votes constantly, and the outcome belongs not to the first vote or the loudest vote, but to whichever vote is cast most consistently over time. This means your doubt tonight does not disqualify you. Your doubt this morning did not undo the work you have already done in your imagination. Even your doubt an hour ago, even the collapse you may have felt when you saw something that seemed to prove your dream impossible, is not the end of the story unless you decide to let it be the end of the story. You are still the author. You are still in this very moment holding the pen. The story is not over until you close the book, and you have not closed the book because you are here right now reading these words, searching for a way to keep assuming, which tells me something important about you. It tells me that some part of you, some deep and unshaken part of you, has already decided not to give up. The truth is, giving up is always available to you. It is the easier path in a strange way, because giving up requires no discipline, no return, no gentle redirection of attention. Giving up simply means agreeing with whatever appears in front of your eyes and calling that agreement realism. But you were not made for the easy agreement with limitation. You were made in the image of a creative power that spoke worlds into being through the simple, unwavering assumption that what was spoken was already so. And that same creative power lives and moves and has its being within you right now, whether you have remembered it today or forgotten it 100 times since this morning. Consider this: the kingdom of God, the ancient teaching says, is within you, not somewhere distant, not something you must wait to earn through decades of suffering. Within you right now, complete, whole, already containing every good thing your heart could desire, waiting only to be recognized, waiting only to be assumed as already true, waiting only for you to stop searching the outer world for what has only ever lived and only ever will live in the deep inner chambers of your own consciousness. This is why the great teachers of consciousness always redirected the seeker inward, not because the outer world does not matter, but because the outer world is always, without exception, a reflection of the inner world, delayed only by the natural lag of manifestation. If your outer world today does not reflect your desire, that does not mean the desire is not yours. It means your inner world has not yet been consistently occupied by the desire long enough for it to cross the bridge into visible form. The solution was never to fight harder with the outer circumstance. The solution has always been to go back inside again and again and again, no matter how many times, and simply live there in the feeling of the wish fulfilled until living there becomes as natural as breathing. You are not your circumstances. You are not your bank account, your relationship status, your diagnosis, your rejection letter, your empty inbox, your quiet phone. Understand this fully. Every one of those things is simply the outer photograph of an inner state that has already at some point been assumed, whether consciously or unconsciously, and held long enough to develop. But a photograph can be retaken. A negative can be exposed to new lights. The very same faculty that produced the photograph you are looking at today, your imagination, your habitual feeling, your assumption about who you are and what is available to you, is fully capable at this very moment of producing an entirely different photograph tomorrow, next month, next year. The only ingredient the process requires, the only ingredient it has ever required, is your willingness to keep assuming, particularly in the space between the old photograph and the new one, particularly through the doubt, particularly when nothing visible seems to confirm that anything has changed at all. Think about this for a moment. A farmer plants a seed and does not stand over the soil every hour digging it up to check on its progress. The farmer understands instinctively that the seed is doing its quiet, invisible work beneath the surface, in the dark, away from every eye, and that the worst thing the farmer could do is disturb that process by demanding premature proof. And yet, how often do we, in our spiritual lives, in our manifestation practice, dig up the seed daily, sometimes hourly, checking our bank balance, checking our phone, checking the mirror, checking every external sign for evidence that our inner assumption is working. And in doing so, we disturb the very roots we are trying to grow. You must realize that faith is not the absence of checking. Faith is the discipline of not checking, or if you do check and the evidence disappoints you, the discipline of returning immediately without lingering in despair to the feeling of already having received. This is the entire art, not the elimination of doubt, but the refusal to let doubt have the final word. The refusal to let one contradictory piece of evidence undo weeks or months of faithful inner cultivation. Let this settle within you now. You have permission to doubt and still keep going. You do not need to achieve some mythical, permanently unshakable state of belief before you are allowed to continue assuming your desire. That mythical state does not exist, not for you, not for anyone who has ever walked this earth in a physical body subject to physical senses. What exists instead, and what is available to you starting right now in this very reading, is the willingness to keep returning. Doubt visits, you notice it, you do not fight it, you simply turn the wheel gently back toward the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and you continue. That is the whole practice. That is the whole secret. It has never been more complicated than that, though the mind, in its attachment to struggle, often wants to make it more complicated than that. Feel this deeply, because I want you to understand something that could change the entire trajectory of your life if you let it. Every person who has ever received an answer to prayer, every person who has ever watched an impossible circumstance transform into a testimony, has done so not because they were free of human weakness, but because they decided in the privacy of their own mind that the weakness would not be the final authority. They kept assuming after the doubt. They kept imagining after the disappointment. They kept feeling the reality of the wish fulfilled, even while their physical eyes reported something entirely different. And it was not the absence of doubt that produced their miracle. It was their refusal to let doubt be the last word. Allow yourself to see this clearly now. Somewhere in your life right now, there is a desire you have perhaps started to believe is not meant for you. Perhaps you have told yourself it is taking too long. Perhaps you have started to notice all the reasons it might never happen. Perhaps you have quietly begun preparing yourself for disappointment, telling yourself that lowering your expectations will hurt less than continuing to hope. I want to speak directly to that part of you now. That preparation for disappointment is itself an assumption, and it is being fed the same creative power as any other assumption you could choose to hold. If you assume disappointment long enough, you will produce disappointment, not because the universe is punishing you, but because you handed your creative power to that very assumption and asked it, in effect, to build you a life around it. This is why it matters so deeply which state you occupy in the quiet, unremarkable moments of your day. Not just in your dedicated meditation time, not just in the moments you deliberately visualize, but in the 10,000 passing moments of an ordinary day, waiting in traffic, washing dishes, lying awake at 2 in the morning. Because it is in these unremarkable, unguarded moments that your habitual assumption reveals itself most honestly, and it is these moments, more than any single dramatic visualization session, that most powerfully shape the world you are building. You are not, and you have never been, sentenced to a life determined entirely by past evidence. Understand this. The past is simply a collection of what you assumed and dwelt in yesterday. It carries no authority over what you assume and dwell in today. Every moment offers you the same invitation it has always offered every soul that has ever lived. The invitation to begin again, right here, right now, unburdened by yesterday's collapse, unburdened by this morning's doubt, unburdened even by the doubt you may feel 5 minutes from now. Because that future doubt, too, will simply be another invitation to return. The truth is, you were never meant to walk this path perfectly. You were meant to walk it faithfully, which is an entirely different thing. Perfection asks that you never fall. Faithfulness simply asks that when you fall, you rise, and you keep walking in the direction of your assumed good, however many times the falling occurs. There is no limit to how many times you are allowed to begin again. There is no cosmic ledger keeping count of your doubts and disqualifying you once you exceed some invisible threshold. The only thing that could ever disqualify you from your desire is a final, permanent decision to stop assuming it altogether. And as long as you have not made that final decision, as long as some ember inside you still returns again and again to the feeling of the wish fulfilled, the process is still very much alive and very much working, whether you can see the evidence yet or not. Consider this, and let it bring you a measure of peace that perhaps you have not felt in a while. The very fact that you continue to care, that you continue to return to this desire even after disappointment, even after evidence that seemed to say otherwise, is itself a sign of the depth of your inner conviction, even if that conviction sometimes hides beneath layers of very human fear. You would not still be reaching if some part of you had not already decided the reaching was worthwhile. Trust that part of yourself. It has been quietly, faithfully working this entire time, even during the moments you thought you had lost your faith completely. Notice what happens when you stop measuring your progress by how quickly the outer world responds and start measuring it instead by how faithfully you return to the assumption after every disruption. This single shift in what you consider evidence of success will change everything about how sustainable your practice becomes. Because if your only metric of success is external manifestation on your own timeline, you will constantly feel like you are failing, even in seasons where your inner world is being profoundly and permanently reshaped beneath the surface. But if your metric of success becomes your willingness to return, your willingness to keep assuming, your willingness to keep choosing the feeling of the wish fulfilled over the feeling of lack, then you will find that you are succeeding every single day, regardless of what the calendar or the bank statement or the empty inbox currently says. Imagine for a moment the person you will become on the other side of this gap you are currently walking through. Not the circumstances alone, though those will change too, but the person, the one who learned through this very stretch of doubt and return, doubt and return, doubt and return, that they possess a strength of spirit they did not know they had. The one who discovered that their inner world truly is more powerful than their outer circumstances, not as a nice idea read in a book, but as a lived, tested, proven truth forged specifically in seasons like the one you are walking through right now. That person is not a fantasy. That person is being built brick by brick, choice by choice, return by return. Every single time you decide once again to keep assuming instead of giving up. You are not late. Understand this fully, because so many hearts carry a quiet, aching fear that they have somehow missed their window, that too much time has passed, that the desire which once felt so alive and so close has now drifted permanently out of reach. This fear is simply another disguised doubt wears, and like every other disguised doubt wears, it is not the truth. It is simply an invitation you are free to decline. There is no cosmic clock ticking against you. There is no expiration date stamped upon your dream by anyone but your own agreement with the idea that time is the master of manifestation rather than consciousness itself. Consciousness does not age. Consciousness does not run out of time. The eternal now, in which every assumption takes root, has no calendar at all, and your desire, however long it has waited, is exactly as available to you today as it was the very first day you dared to imagine it. Let this settle within you deeply. The delay you are experiencing is not punishment. It is not evidence of unworthiness. It is not the universe testing whether you deserve your good before it will release it to you, because that framing, however common, misunderstands the entire nature of grace. You do not earn your desire through suffering. You do not prove yourself worthy through enough disappointment. The delay, when it happens, is simply the natural lag between an inner state being assumed and an outer world being restructured around that assumption, and the length of that lag has far more to do with the consistency of your return to the state than with any question of your worthiness, which was never in question to begin with. This is why it matters that you release the subtle belief, if you are carrying it, that you must somehow suffer your way toward your good. Understand this clearly. Struggle is not what produces manifestation. Struggle, in fact, often delays it, because struggle keeps your attention fixed on lack rather than fixed on fulfillment. What produces manifestation is not suffering, not striving, not straining against the doubt with white-knuckled effort. What produces manifestation is simply the calm, repeated, patient return to the feeling of already having, already being, already living, the answered version of your desire, held not with tension but with a quiet, settled knowing, the same quiet knowing you have about the sun rising tomorrow, a knowing so complete it requires no anxious defense. Feel this deeply now. You are being invited in this very moment to lay down the exhausting habit of fighting your doubt and instead simply outlast it. You do not have to win an argument against every doubtful thought that arises. You do not have to produce a counter-argument for every piece of contrary evidence the world presents you. You simply have to keep returning gently, patiently, faithfully to the feeling of your fulfilled desire, trusting that this simple, unremarkable, quiet return, repeated enough times, is more powerful than any dramatic act of willpower could ever be. The truth is, willpower was never the mechanism of manifestation. Assumption was. Willpower exhausts itself. Assumption held gently and returned to consistently does not exhaust itself, because it asks nothing of you but to feel again and again the reality of what you desire, as though it were already so. This is not a technique reserved for the spiritually advanced. This is available to you exactly as you are right now. Doubts and all fears and all disappointments and all, you must realize finally that the very fact you have not yet given up, the very fact that something in you keeps searching, keeps returning, keeps reaching even now, is not a small thing. It is, in fact, the entire mechanism by which every miracle in recorded history has ever occurred. Not a person free of doubt, not a person with perfect, unwavering certainty every moment of every day, but a person who, when doubt visited, simply chose one more time to keep assuming. And then when doubt visited again, chose one more time to keep assuming again, and then again, until the gap between the invisible and the visible closed quietly, invisibly, in a manner and a moment that could not have been predicted from the outside, because that is how grace has always worked, arriving not on the schedule of the doubting mind, but on the schedule of the faithful heart that never quite let go. So let this be the truth you carry with you when you close this and step back into your day, back into your circumstances, back into whatever evidence currently surrounds you. Keep assuming. Not because the doubt will never return, it will, and that is simply part of being human, but because you now understand something most people never learn, that the doubt returning is not a signal to stop. It is simply the terrain of the path you are already walking. And every soul who has ever arrived at their answered prayer walked through this exact same terrain, doubted in this exact same way, and kept going anyway. You are not behind. You are not disqualified. You are in this very moment exactly where you need to be, held by a power greater than your doubt, capable of bringing forth exactly what you have dared to assume, if only you will keep assuming all the way, no matter how many times, until the very end.